Hello, we are back with another video. In today's video, we want to share the history of one of the most popular sports in the world, football. If you look at civilizations throughout history, almost all of them had some form of ball game. For example, the Chinese played a game called Cuju as early as 2300 BC. The term Cuju literally translates to kickball in Chinese, and it was popular among both soldiers and nobles. In this game, the ball was thrown onto a field, and players had to pass it through a small opening above the goal. Each team that succeeded earned 1 point. It can be said that this was the first sport similar to modern football, and many historians believe that it is the origin of today's football. Of course, other civilizations also had similar games. For example, in Iran, they played polo, while the Greeks had a game called episkiros, which was somewhat like ancient football. However, in episkiros, players used their hands. Now let's move to the other side of the world. The Maya Empire. The Mayas had a game that was quite violent, in which players threw a heavy rubber ball onto the field and had to hit it with their backs. The force of these strikes was so intense that many players suffered internal bleeding and even died during the game. The high-ranking Mayas sat and watched this game, taking pleasure in the suffering of the players who were often slaves. These players were akin to gladiators, competing for their lives in the game. However, these games continued in various forms around the world, often evolving until the 12th century in England, when an interesting game emerged in this country. They called this game mob football. In this game, two neighboring villages would identify a midpoint between them, where a ball would be placed. About 40 or 50 people from each village would gather and begin fighting for control of the ball. Their goal was to carry the ball and hit the door of the church in the opposing village. The village that successfully did this would be declared the winner. That's why it was called mob football, because two teams fought each other with the intention of winning at any cost. Now let's go to France, where this game was launched. This violent game continued for years, but gradually, with the establishment of rules, its violence decreased and made the games more attractive. We arrive at the 19th century, a time when various universities were being established in England. Some students took the initiative to formalize the mob football game, making it more organized and starting to play against other students. At first, the players used both their hands and feet in this game, but gradually some students suggested that it would be more interesting if they only played with their feet. Following this idea, the game was divided into two types, one in which players used both hands and feet, and another in which players played exclusively with their feet. Both versions of the game were referred to as soccer, while dropping the term mob, as the violence was significantly reduced and everyone played by the rules. This is where modern football began to take shape. Gradually, the popularity of games that used both hands and feet declined, which led to the growth of football played exclusively with the feet. The version that used both hands and feet was eventually renamed rugby. At that time, rugby fans referred to rugby as football and called what we now know as football soccer. It's interesting to note that in Australia, rugby is still called football, while football is referred to as soccer. Similarly, in the United States, football is also called soccer because they developed another game, similar to rugby, which they called football. The rest of the world refers to their version as American football, which is quite different from the football played in other countries. Various teams were formed in England by students from different universities, but none of these teams were professional or serious until 1857, when the world's first football club was founded in the city of Sheffield, England. It was called Sheffield FC, or Sheffield Football Club. About 6 years later, London decided to gather the best players from across England and announced them as the England team. They challenged Sheffield, as well as other university teams, stating that while there was no official national team for them to compete against at the time, this London-based team would be considered the England national team. Of course, the British were strategic and knew exactly what they were doing. With their empire spanning the globe, they quickly spread the game worldwide. The most significant growth occurred in Europe, North America, South America, and Australia. They also introduced the game to Africa and Asia, but due to a lack of facilities, it didn't grow as much in those regions. However, football rapidly expanded across the Americas and Europe. If you've enjoyed this video, please support us by liking, commenting, and subscribing.
Your engagement helps us reach more people. Thank you for being part of our community.
It's interesting to note that at the time, America took football or soccer, as they called it, more seriously because they always wanted to compete with England and not be seen as inferior. Over time, American football gained prominence in the US, largely due to capitalism driving its growth. American football is designed to allow for frequent advertisements, whereas regular football, soccer, can't be interrupted for 45 minutes straight. The 15-minute halftime break is often not sufficient for substantial advertising on TV, making its ad slots less valuable compared to American football, which airs ads every 5 minutes. The growth of basketball and baseball is also driven by capitalism, as they provide ample opportunities for advertising between plays. Now, let's return to the main topic of our video. The first match between England and Scotland took place in 1872. The game ended in a score of 0-0, with no goals scored. Isn't it interesting that the first match between the national teams of the two countries ended without a goal? When news of this game spread to European and American countries, many sought to form their own teams, particularly national teams. Following England and Scotland, the next countries to establish national teams were Argentina and Uruguay, who played their first match against each other, resulting in a 6-0 victory for Argentina. Austria and Hungary, which were part of an empire at that time, each formed their own national teams and played a match against each other. The result of this game was 5-0 victory for Austria. The news of these games spread across the world. Like an avalanche that grows larger as it descends from the top of a mountain, football is also becoming increasingly popular and developing rapidly. In 1904, the football federation known as FIFA was established in Paris. FIFA stands for Fédération Internationale de Football Association, which is French for International Federation of Association Football. They established FIFA to regulate international matches and assist countries that wanted to form national football teams. FIFA included football in the 1908 London Olympics, which is considered the first football tournament of its kind. In this event, the English national team won the first gold medal in football for England. Of course, FIFA initially focused only on Europe and did not include South American teams. As a result, they formed their own federation called CONMEBOL, which initially included 4 countries: Uruguay, Chile, Brazil, and Argentina. The 1924 Olympics were held in Paris, and this year, after 100 years, the 2024 Olympics were also held in Paris. In the 1924 Olympics, Uruguay defeated all European teams and secured the gold medal. Uruguay shocked everyone with this important achievement. After their victory, many countries invested heavily in strengthening their teams and making them professional, aiming to gain glory on the world stage. Let's turn to the 1928 Olympics in Amsterdam, where European and South American teams competed. Uruguay emerged as the champion once again in this Olympic tournament. The excitement surrounding football at the Olympics prompted FIFA to rethink the sport's structure. They asked, why not have a World Cup of our own? Consequently, they established the World Cup, which began 2 years later in 1930, hosted by Uruguay. Everyone recognizes this as the first World Cup, and just like in the Olympics, Uruguay became the champion once again. In addition to the World Cup that was established, various clubs also began to form. Every company or organization with financial power created a club and built a team. After the 1930 World Cup, many countries expressed their desire to form national teams. As the number of football teams in the world increased, each continent established its own federation. South America formed CONMEBOL, North America created CONCACAF, Asia established the AFC, Europe has UEFA, Africa set up CAF, and Australia and Oceania formed OFC. Eventually, Australia joined Asia to compete with stronger teams and enhance its growth. It's interesting to note that the first non-American and non-European team to participate in the World Cup was Egypt in the 1934 tournament, while South Korea was the first Asian team to enter the World Cup in 1954. Some sources claim that the first Asian team in the World Cup was Indonesia in 1938. But others believe that the team was not really Indonesian, as Indonesia participated in the 1938 World Cup under the name Dutch East Indies before its independence in 1945. From this point forward, football will continue to grow richer, and its World Federation,